Say. Okay. Yeah, We All California is very happy to be hosting today Mary Lunetta, who is from the California kind of Sierra Club group. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the roadless rule and the kind of the federal administration's impact on public lands more generally. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for her to share some information with us. She's got some slides, and then the rest of the time we'll have for group conversation, discussion, questions. So yeah. Mary, take it away.
Okay, great. We'll do. I'll share my screen. Let's see. Is this working? Do you guys see the presentation? Oh, wait, maybe that's not
Yes.
the presenter view though. You see
You're
all
a
my
little bit zoomed in. There we go. Yeah. A little bit. There we go. Perfect.
Okay. And then I can move through. Okay, great. All right. Yeah. Oh, so thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having a platform for me. I'll take a few minutes to discuss an issue that impacts many of us. It's called the Roadless Rule, protecting the Roadless Rule. But first off, I'll introduce myself in a little bit more detail. I am the National Conservation Strategist for the National Sierra Club. And what that means is that I work here in California, specifically for California. I'm the strategist. I work with all 13 of our chapters that we have across the state to advance our national conservation priorities to protect our public lands. And that includes our national forests. It includes our deserts, our BLM land, or land that's managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and as well as our national monuments and our national parks. So any land that is managed by our federal government and is protected, that's the area that I work with our chapters and partners across the state to keep protected. Like I mentioned, I'm in Idlewild, which is in Southern California. I'm on the San Jacinto mountain range. But I'm from Pacific Beach originally, so grew up in the beach and come to the mountain, and I go back and forth a lot. And I love to camp and hike and off-road and wildcraft and cook and make a lot of herbal remedies with plants that I find on the mountain. There are a number of fights that we have in front of us at the moment. And it's all under this umbrella, really, of attempts to sell off our public lands and to dismantle long-standing protections that are in place for those public lands. And the purpose for this really is because there's companies and industries chomping at the bit to get to these lands for profit, whether it's to drill or to mine or to log or to develop them. There's a lot of money to be made, and it's one threat after another. Kind of just feels like a fire hose or something. Like, just so much is happening, and so we really have to be strategic and thoughtful and smart with how we focus our energies, because there's so many threats coming at us, including one to threats to dismantle the roadless rule. So the roadless rule was established 25 years ago in 2001. It it establishes roadless areas, and it's large areas of land across our country. Across the country, it's almost 60 million acres. Here in California, it's almost 4.5 million acres. So it's pretty substantial. When it was first passed in 2001, there was massive support for it. There was 600 public meetings across the country, which is a lot. Just to give you some perspective, that's a huge amount compared to other efforts. And we generated 1.6 million comments, 97 of which were very supportive. And what resulted from that was these protections established that these areas are not to have roads built. And when I say roads, a road is like the asphalt that they put down. It's not like fire roads or what we often call trails, which is like where some vehicles can do roading on. It's really like no roads with asphalt, and the and so what that means though is like because there's no roads, it means that there's also not going to be any effort ability to do construction or logging, and for the majority of people that access these areas, it's through hiking and it's through backcountry mountaineering and camping. Hunters are really love roadless areas because they're so quiet because there are no real vehicles out there. And there these are the most basically there's like the most pristine of the pristine forests. Our watersheds are there, our headwaters are there, pristine wildlife habitats. And it's what we've learned over the last several decades is that this is also where wildfires tend to not start. Through data that we've gathered, most wildfires are within very close proximity to a road. 80% of wildfires begin close to roads. So these are areas that are also really special for communities that are up against that urban wildland interface, like myself, like here, where I live in the national forest. So to give you a sense of where these areas are across the country, here's a map. So you can see where the IRA stands for inventoried roadless areas. Most are managed by the forest system. Some are not, but we won't get into that. But yeah, this is mostly on the west, with a lot of it being in California. And I'll zoom in on some other areas. So, for example, in the Los Angeles region, there's roadless areas that appear in the red. Hold on, let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, just to confirm. So, so in the Angeles National Forest, there's a lot of roadless areas, and I hope this gives you some orientation of where we're talking about there. But the Cucamonga Wilderness is in there, Magic Mountain Wilderness, which is close to Magic Mountain, Sheep Mountain Wilderness. A lot of really beautiful wilderness areas are in the LA region. And then I just picked a random area to show you as well, Tahoe. So you can see the orange is where the roadless areas are. And just to give you an idea of some of the places that are protected within roadless areas, it includes Castle Peak and Basin Peak, Granite Chief Region, Mount Lola and Sierra Crest, Upper Truckee Headwaters, so much more that I couldn't fit on the screen. But that just gives you an idea. And I wish I could show you all of the state alone so that you can see more based on where you all are located. Excuse me. So the roadless rule is administrative. The Trump administration is proposing to rescind the roadless rule. Let me just go back actually to here. The there's going to be a public hearing announced. Sorry, let me back up. There's going to be a public comment period announced, or a DEIS, a draft environmental impact statement released. We're actually 4 months late. We were told it was going to be in March. It hasn't come and gone. We don't actually know when it's going to be, but when it does kick off, we may just have 2 weeks of a comment period, as opposed to back in 2001, there was a year and a half of people collecting comments. So the comment period and opportunity for public input has been drastically shrunken, and we know that to be true. And it's no secret that the Trump administration is proposing to rescind the roadless rule, meaning that all these roadless areas can be removed from the protection of that they currently have. The purpose for that, like I mentioned earlier, is so that industry can get in here and get in and do logging and sell off these areas. It would be really devastating to our recreation economy, to the communities that surround these areas. Like myself, I live near a roadless area here in Idlewild. It's actually where part of the Pacific Crest Trail goes through, and so it would, potentially, if that were to be sold off or desecrated, it would really impact our local economy and who comes to our town to hike and recreate. There's going to be a public comment period, like I mentioned. It's probably going to be very short, but once it does kick off, it's very important that we have people submit comments to the U.S. Forest Service, expressing their deep respect and appreciation for these lands. So if you are not already signed up for the Sierra Club, I mean, that's one group that you can sign up to join, to hear updates on this. But there's so many other conservation groups that are also following this issue and working together collaboratively. In addition to the administrative route to dismantle the roadless rule, there's also efforts underway in Congress to protect and also desecrate the roadless rule. So there is a piece of legislation called RACA, the Roadless Area Conservation Act, and what it would do is just lock in the protections through legislation, requiring congressional action to ever alter them. So that's a much higher level of engagement, makes it harder to do. So there's a House version that we're currently supporting. And if any of your representatives are on the screen right now, those are who our targets are. So if any of these names are people that represent you, do us a favor and call them, email them, let them know that you really want to see roadless areas protected. And the ask is that they become a co-sponsor for RACA, for the Roadless Area Conservation Act. And I'll just say many of these are Democrats, and I think all of them actually. And the only reason why they haven't probably signed on as a co-sponsor is because they're not hearing from constituents in their region, not because they're not supportive of the issue. Like I said, there's just a fire hose of threats that are happening, and getting this information in front of their faces and their staffers is really the most important place of where we're at with this attempt. Okay, and there's a few other ways that you can help protect the roadless rule. We have a petition, sc.org/roadless. You can go there and you can sign the petition, leave a comment. Once the comment portal kicks off and opens up, then we'll be able to deliver those comments to the Forest Service. Also meet with your congressional representative, super important to do that. We have a number of town halls throughout the state, many of which have already passed, but we have 3 that are upcoming in various regions, one in Redding, one in Thousand Oaks in the LA area, and another in, gosh, where's the other one? I'm forgetting. I'm sorry, but I can follow up through email with information about those events if anyone would like to attend. Another really important action that you could take is to submit a letter to the editor or an op-ed to your local paper calling for the protection of our roadless forests. And then also connect with your local Sierra Club chapter if you'd like to get involved and maybe go on an outing to a roadless area. There's some additional things that you can do. One I'll mention, I think I have a link that I can send here in the chat. Do we have a chat? Oh,
We do.
being weird. I'll once I'm not sharing, I think I'll share it, but it's the link to the Facebook group that you see on the screen. We have a Public Lands Action Team Facebook group, and it's where we share updates on things that are like really important, big things that happen in the public lands conservation space. And a lot of it is links to news articles in the like Facebook sphere where news is being shared that isn't accurate, that's false, incomplete, or complete lies. For example, we just had on Monday, President Trump signed an executive order dismantling 90% of 2 national monuments in Utah, Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante. And in the news, many news articles are quoting him having said that no one can go on these monuments. Like, people can barely hike and walk them, which is completely untrue. So that's an example of where we would share in the group, and then people could go and share facts in the comments on these types of news articles to help educate the public. Yeah, so the last thing I'll end with is that National Public Lands Day is coming up in September. It's on September 26th, which I believe is a Monday. And this is a recurring annual event, and every year it gives people an opportunity to go on chapter outings with their local Sierra Club to national monuments, to national forests, wilderness areas. You can organize trail cleanups in local parks, or host really fun events like trivia or happy hours or like tree plantings, or you can get really serious with it and do community workshops and town halls with rangers, scientists and ecologists, and tribal leaders as well to talk about the cultural heritage and conservation issues with specific public landscapes. All right. I think that was a lot. I went over my time. Thanks for your patience. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Not too much over at all since we started a little bit after the hour. Thank you so much, Mary, for especially the thorough what we can actually do to participate section of what you had to share. So yeah, now we'll open it up to the group for questions. I see Lauren's already got her hand up and she's eager. So we'll start with her just after I remind everyone, try to keep it relatively brief so we save space for everybody to ask a question if they have a question. And yeah, if you want to pop questions in the chat or raise your hand, whatever, I'll kind of help moderate a little bit. But Lauren, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mary. Thank you for this presentation. I've been super interested by this regulation, and so it's amazing just to hear the overview. And yeah, my first question was going to be around like what are the actual effective things that we can be doing? And so thank you for that really thorough overview. I think I'm curious about, you mentioned at the beginning, like there's so much happening, and then we need to be very strategic about where we're putting our energy. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to like why this in particular is where we should be putting our energy.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, roadless areas are our last pristine forests. These are where there's no development. When you go deep into a roadless area, you'll notice immediately how quiet it is. And because there's no development, there's no roads, it is the most pristine wildlife habitats that we have. And the headwaters, it's also the location of where many of our headwaters are located that trickle down and give drinking water to the communities down below. And so making sure that those waters stay really clean is so important. Yeah, I can't stress that enough because once the water gets dirty or there's industry that comes in or roads that start to get built, it does impact the water. The headwaters and also the wildlife, and it becomes loud, and then the wildlife gets scared and they're moving around too much. Yeah, there's endless, there's also, I mean, going back into recreation too, like our conservation of these lands is so important, but also people's enjoyment of them is really important. And it's really like a key part of our American way of life, making sure that hunters can go into these areas and have the ability to hunt. If there's roads, then those abilities disappear because the wildlife won't stay in that area. And it's necessary to have that kind of quiet for them, but also backpackers and anglers, right? I think it's a term for people who like to go fishing, is also a huge pastime and necessity for a lot of folks in our country. And so making sure that they have access to good fish that they can have access to in the roadless areas is also really key. So once these areas are gone, essentially we've lost our most pristine forests, and it's devastating. It makes me think of watching Fern Gully when I was 10 years old. It's like we must save the forest. This is it.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I just saw Fern Gully for the first time recently. It's so funny that you
For the
bring that
first
up.
time. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and just also to add on briefly some context local to me, the Sierra Nevadas, the Tahoe area, there's a lot of roadless land, and a lot of that is part of the watershed that feeds Reno. A lot of the water in the Reno area is being threatened by data centers, and so if we pollute what is upstream, then they're really gonna have no water to drink. So that's kind of like bigger picture for me, at least, where I am at. Cami, sounds like your microphone's not working, but you've put a couple things in the chat that I'm just going to highlight for the group. So your first question was, where can we get a map of all the areas impacted countrywide? I don't know, Mary, if you have a resource for that.
I
Um,
do. Yes.
we
Thank you
pop in
for
the
asking
chat,
that
maybe.
question. Yeah. So I'll just clarify this map this morning. I went to go look at it and get some screen grabs from it, and it's not working, which is the first time in like months and months and months that that's been the case. But I'm working with the folks that built it for us, so hopefully the problem's gone. But when you click the link I just shared in the chat, you'll see a map, and you can maneuver around over to California, and you can zoom in to your area. And when this is working, hopefully later today, you'll see the roadless areas will appear in orange. And then in the bottom right of the map, you can also click a little box for congressional districts, which will give you some lines that show your like where the congressional districts are. And when you click it, it'll tell you who your representative is, or who the representative is that has a certain roadless area in their district. And that's because that's so key. It's so important that we're communicating with our representatives on this issue.
Amazing. And then Cammie's other comment was there are some arguments about needing roads to access these areas to fight fires, and then also just general access concerns for people who are maybe disabled or otherwise unable to get to these beautiful areas. If you mind addressing those comments.
Yeah, let me see. Are those questions in the chat?
Yes, she kind of typed it into the chat.
Okay,
You
sorry.
scroll up just a little bit.
Yeah, okay,
I
great.
think I think Cammie's saying that's the argument that the people are making to rescind
Yes.
the roadless.
Yeah, that's true. So the other side is claiming they're kind of avoiding the elephant in the room, which is that industry is trying to get to these lands to make some money, some big money. They're claiming, falsely so, that if we were to, do away with the roadless rule, that there can be roads built to fight fires. But this is untrue. You don't build roads with asphalt and like construction crews to fight a fire as it's raging. That's not how that works. I'm an avid off-roader, which can be sometimes controversial to say, as also the chief conservation strategist for the Sierra Club. I don't believe that they are at odds. I believe in leave no trace and stewarding our land and also enjoying our land responsibly. And when I'm off-roading with my family, we are on trails. They're dirt roads. They're created with sometimes heavy machinery in order to create a space for the road, but crews absolutely can still access those areas and build roads with that machinery, and human crews, which is not the same thing as building a road. We're talking about apples and oranges. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. It's not logical what they're claiming. There's no evidence that's backing up what they're saying as well. So if you go down that rabbit hole, which I encourage anyone to do, is to like do your homework on what people are claiming. There's no precedence of building roads with asphalt to fight fires. It just doesn't exist.
I have also seen a few like firefighter related organizations kind of supporting the roadless rule
Yes.
in the recent kind of threats to it. So I'm going to take the pros at their word that if they say they don't need these paved roads to fight the fires, I'm going to believe them. Okay, we've got a hand up from the Hotlum Regeneration Camp. But you go ahead if you would like to share your question.
I'm not sure it's as much of a question as maybe some comments. This is the first I've ever heard anyone suggest that the rescinding of the roadless rule is only in effect for paving roads. My understanding is that it is to allow for access into areas that have been deemed for environmental reasons to not be appropriate locations for roads, and that would also include any kind of motorized vehicle activity, unless there are certain circumstances like after a catastrophic event. And so that's my understanding, is that it's not about paving, but it is about maintaining or rebuilding access points into these inventoried areas that for environmental reasons they've deemed unfit. And there's a lot of deconstruction of roads in my area. In my greater area of the Shasta Trinity National Forest, we have over 1 million miles of roads, and there's way more roads that have been deconstructed. My concern is that the land that I hold title to and that I tend is surrounded by inventory roadless areas on two sides and backed up against wilderness on another side. And if those areas are deemed to no longer be inventory roadless areas, the off-road vehicle community will be entering that area in a much more prolific way. And I don't know if you know anything about stratovolcanoes and soil types and such, but the soil is what's called Delaney soil, and it's extremely fragile soil. And when we have large rain events, we have mud flows, which are catastrophic events. And the roads have already been wiped out in the area following the lava fire in 2021. And so if these roads were then reestablished, it would just be a recipe for more erosion problems based on what we're experiencing atmospherically with heavier rainfall and less snowpack. And so, you know, we've even lost access to this property up on the slopes of Mount Shasta due to a rain event already. And when you have traffic in the area, it just makes matters worse. And so I think that's one of the reasons why these areas have been inventoried as roadless. But there were historic roads that were two that remained open, and those were the ones that wiped out during this this flood event. And so I'm wondering if there's any considerations. This is what my understanding is, because I'm working very closely with my ranger district and the district ranger of the Shasta Training National Forest in trying to decide what are the best approaches for a project called the Lava Roads Project that's been in the works for 4 years. And I'm wondering if the Sierra Club is considering what are the ways we can work, not necessarily with Washington D.C. and Congress, but work with our local authorities to, for environmental reasons, maintain these pristine areas that may or may not even be pristine anymore, but they have environmental reasons why there shouldn't be motorized traffic in them.
Yeah, so every location and every inventoried roadless area has its own unique management plan. And so when I was mentioning off-road vehicles earlier, in most cases, and my understanding is that those are trails, not roads, and they're dirt, so the threat of ignition is lower as opposed to if it was an actual road with asphalt. But they've existed, and they're oftentimes on fire roads anyway. But in some cases, in some inventoried roadless areas, there are very few, if any, of those as well. And so it's very, very common to not have any motorized vehicles. I didn't want to like paint a false picture there, but it's just it's a talking point of the other side who's opposed to the roadless rule, saying that they want to have more areas for recreation for off-road vehicles. And I want to just clarify that people still can have access in roadless areas to recreate in some cases. It's that being said, there's ample evidence that shows that motorized vehicles leads to wildfires and sparks. And so it's safer to not have any roads because it's safer to not have any traffic when you're coming from a wildfire perspective. That being said, from a local management perspective, if there are nuances or specific needs to have a specific type of road for some sort of access, especially for someone who might live or own land in the area, that comes down to the local management of that region. And that might be a scenario where we need to assess the scope of the roadless rule, or maybe some additional changes to the roadless rule and how it's implemented at the local level. That is not where my expertise lies. Right now, I'm just trying to prevent the roadless rule from being rescinded fully. It's a very black and white situation that we're facing with the federal government and the roadless rule. It's very black and white. There's almost no room for nuance at the federal level. Trump and none of the folks in his administration are thinking about nuanced ways to like improve the roadless rule or roadless areas. So once we're past the stage that we're in, which is to protect the roadless rule and protect our roadless areas. I think down the line in the future, when we have some more friendly administration at the federal level, then we can start to get into some more finer tuned discussions around how to make the roadless rule more effective for all of the stakeholders who have to interface with roadless areas. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if it does, but feel free to ask a follow-up question if you need to, and I'll do my best.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any really succinct questions, but one of the things that I'm really, really aware of is that we have motorized vehicle use maps within the forest districts, and yet the public is not aware of these motorized vehicle use maps that show which roads are open to motorized vehicles and which ones are not. And the Forest Service doesn't have the funding or the ability to, deconstruct many of these roads or to block them off to, public traffic and only have administrative use on them.
Sure.
And some of them are just almost impossible to block off. And it seems to me that we could put our efforts into educating the public, especially the off-road vehicle community, in the use of these motorized vehicle use maps for fire prevention and for ecological reasons. And many of the large map companies have a lot of misinformation. The one that starts with G in particular is, notoriously misinformed about what roads are, open and what roads are not. And so I think we need to encourage people to, respect these areas and to have accurate information. And I don't know if some of the other newer map companies that are emerging that are, pushing their maps for recreational users, are very accurate because they tend to be more of a pay to play. But
Yeah.
I want to encourage people to, and maybe the Sierra Club can take a hand in that, or any other off-road vehicle use proponents can take a hand in, getting this information out to people, the general public, about the off-road vehicle use maps.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Also, like, yeah, I have a hand in both worlds, like conservation and also off-road, and it's so sensitive and so tricky to approach the off-road community on these issues because they are so inundated with false information and narratives that are untrue. But that's not everyone, and trying to find the folks that are reasonable, that are conservation minded, is tricky, but it's not impossible. And we have been making some inroads, pardon the pun, among the OHV community when it comes to national monument protection efforts, which is new. It's like really new what we're doing in that regard, specifically down south, to protect Quetzon, which is a proposed national monument near the Mexico, Arizona, California border. And it's so new and it's so sensitive, and it's like these things take years to develop relationships with OHV groups, to find that common ground together. I would be very excited and eager to do the same thing when it comes to roadless. I haven't had an opportunity yet, just because again we're just really focused on trying to prevent the rule from being rescinded. But I do think that there's a lot of conversations to be had with so many different diverse stakeholders, off-road groups included, as well as tribal communities and members of the tribal community that are also off-roaders and also want to see these areas protected. People wear multiple hats and come with like diverse, nuanced identities. And I think being honest and open about that is really important with the future of this movement. And no one else could be better enthusiastic or more enthusiastic about that than me. I just don't think that we're there yet in California. I think we just have this like fight in front of us at the moment. And once we can get through this fight, then I think we're going to have a long road ahead of us on keeping roadless protected, but also making sure that those areas are safe from wildfire and safe from erosion that can definitely happen with scary weather, wet weather. Those are all increasing, and we want to make sure that people who are on those trails are also safe and not putting them or their families in danger because they're on dangerous trails and not roads, but yeah. So yeah, thanks for having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
David, you've had your hand up for a minute.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm very curious about where it's at politically, like in the steps. Obviously there's a big difference between just issuing a statement, an executive order, or, legislation being passed. And then, maybe just your thoughts also on, um, given how previous votes are going or other orders, like there was just some demand to cut back tribal lands that's essentially illegal and so forth. How you see the prospects of this vote going, and what other than pushing democratic leaders, which I will do, what
Yeah.
else could we do? So I guess, is it an executive order? Is it a bill? Is it, so
So what happened on so there's no executive order about roadless rule yet. Um, the we're in an administrative phase, so we're just going through the process of like public comment period and then members of Congress hearing from their constituents, and then the idea is for that to trickle up and get to those within the administration. And I think it's working because we were supposed to hear in March a release of the DEIS and a corresponding comment period, and it's now mid-July, and we haven't heard if it's going to be released this month or next month. So they've really pushed out the release of the comment period, and I think it's because we've been really working hard and mobilizing so many communities to contact members of Congress, and they know that this is not popular for them to be proposed to rescind it. So keeping that pressure on our members of Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, is very important. When it comes to Dems, like I mentioned earlier, we just need to educate them because so many of them were not around in 2001 when this issue first came up. So it's a learning curve situation. When it comes to Republicans here in California, we have some targets. I'll put their names in the chat. These are Republicans who we feel are movable on public lands issues because either, like in some cases, they have joined the bipartisan public lands caucus, which is awesome. That's Kylie, that's Valadeo, and I believe that's Obernolte. But then there's others like Kim and Calvert who are who are not opposed to public lands. They're not the Republicans that are like drill baby drill. They're more like not very educated on public lands issues because they don't have any experience with it. And so hearing from their constituents is key. Like Kim, she's in the Los Angeles area, like Orange County area. And then there's Calvert. He's my representative. Idlewild is in his district. Chuckwalla National Monument is in his district. And so he's really business minded, and hearing from the local business community, which we're in the middle of doing right now, we're organizing an economic roundtable with him with almost 60 business leaders in Idlewild have signed on to a sign-on letter directed to him, encouraging him to protect our public lands. That's going to get through to him because he's so business minded. So there's, every one of them is like a unique snowflake, but we've identified these folks as being potentially movable and speaking out, not just in terms of roadless, but in terms of all of our public lands. And so what we have seen time and time again and in many campaigns throughout the decades is that when we really harass and become like squeaky wheels with our electeds, they can't ignore us. And so calling, emailing, we can't underscore the importance of that. Multiple times, we advise our supporters to call their member of Congress like at least 2 times a week, just to be like, hey, protect our roadless areas, especially if there's roadless areas in their district. So did that answer your question? I think there's a multiple parts to it. I'm sorry.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Lauren asked a question a few minutes ago in the chat that I want to circle back to. She said, what are the potential development logging timelines that could arise if the rule is changed? Do you have any idea like how fast things would be affected if the rule was overturned?
So there's like no way to really answer this though, because Trump is not a fan of process or order or the law, and he's chaotic. I mean, this is just like the facts. And so we don't, so it could be illegal for him to like send in give access to some sort of logging company, but it could still happen. Anything could happen. And then at that point, we're assessing like what are our direct action abilities. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that ever happened. It'd be awful, but then we would just pivot into like, you know, rapid response. People probably like chaining themselves to trees again situations, Um, but if there's an executive order, for example, that gets signed, that would be not great, like what we saw on Monday with the National Monuments attack. But it doesn't really direct action. It's not. It's kind of a nothing burger. Not to say it's not worthy of our attention and our outrage and our action, but executive orders are more. They're kind of just like things to say. They don't actually implement much. So, when it comes, but we are in the middle of like several lawsuits, even from his first term. Trump did a lot of damage in the first term and tried to do this before, where he took away longstanding protections, and he doesn't really have the right to do that. He does not have the right to do that. Not really, he doesn't. And so things are getting tied up in court. So there's a whole legal process as well. But that being said, like he's a chaos goblin, so we don't know what to expect or what could happen. I, yeah, I think we just got to stay on our toes.
Thanks also for, yeah, addressing the recent national monument news. I think that that's been kind of overwhelming my feed a little bit lately and burying some other things. It's interesting to hear you call it a nothing burger because people are certainly very upset about it.
Yeah, I don't mean to like say it's not
Yeah.
easy and it's awful, but he's been signing these executive orders like crazy since he's entered office. And in the beginning, I was like having heart palpitations and losing sleep over the fact that he signed the executive order to like unleash the timber industry. And I'm like in the national forest. I live in the national forest. And I'm like, what the hell? And then, but my director of the conservation campaign, who's been around a long time, he was very it was a sobering thing to learn, which is like this is the executive orders are a way to like galvanize his base, win allies, create alliances and freak people out. It only becomes real and serious is when that starts to become implemented in some tangible, real way. And so I don't know what's next when it comes to Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, in terms of the executive order turning into anything real. That's what I'm still figuring out with like our lawyers and our legal team and our policy experts that are in DC, really close to all of this happening. We're just staying ready to see what we can do and what's going to happen next. It's a nothing burger, but it's also really fucked up and serious. Sorry for my language there. It's like both and, if that makes
Both
sense.
and. Yeah, thank you so much for being one of the people and in communication with the people that are focusing on this because it is so helpful to hear from you today. Just like these are the things, these are the people to contact, these are the things that are actually helpful and effective. It's so helpful to just have not have to do that work myself, right? Got another hand up. Did you have something to share or add there?
Yeah, I want to be kind of cautionary about what I'm going to say, um, because I too have been very alarmed by the threat of the reversal of the roadless rule, as well as the massive land sell-off of public lands. Um, and I do feel that a lot of it is kind of blowing smoke because there is less influence from Washington, D.C., as we might imagine in rural parts of the country. But California is, one of the states that has the most public lands, and we do have to, protect it as best we can. And I just want to encourage people to kind of take a deep breath back and take, a moment and then figure out who the local influencers are, in particular your district rangers or people who are in charge of the BLM land in your area, and strive to connect with people locally because they oftentimes have a lot more influence than somebody sitting in an Oval Office thousands of miles away. And so I think it has to be an and also approach. I've had some real tremendous success working with my local forest. And I want to encourage people to feel like, they can act locally as well as think about what's happening nationally. But I think that's really, really critical that we know that there's, some continuity to some of these career forestry management and land management executives, not executives, but land management, whatever you call the people at the top of the government, bureaucrats, that their careers last through, half a dozen or a dozen or more presidencies. And so we have to, support them in doing what they know how to do best. So support your local agencies and reach out and speak to them, the local land management agencies.
That's really important advice. I know here in the Tahoe area, I've personally heard from quite a few people who have recently left federal kind of land management ranger positions in the last couple years because of their frustrations with the federal government. So the ones that are left that are sticking it out are definitely super important to have relationships with. Cami put another question in the chat. I'm assuming your mic's still not working, so I'll read it out for everyone. What can California do to protect federal lands within our state boundaries? Do we have any jurisdiction? A great question.
Um, so I think going back to putting pressure on our electeds is the most important thing that we can do, truly. I don't know if your question is thinking about what the state can do or like the governor, but we really want to like avoid any sort of land transfers or discussions because we're not quite there yet. We don't want to get put the cart before the horse. I know that that's been a topic in some states, but here in California, that conversation hasn't come up yet. Um, and I think things would have to get pretty serious and dire and like real for us to be doing something so drastic, and it would have to be like last resort type of situation. But yeah, I know several Forest Service people also who support the administration, but are a little bit like less concern. Like I think their concerns are really not so much the roadless rule, but more like making sure that they are well funded and that they are a healthy department and functioning, service for their communities that they serve. And I live in a very small town where like I'm very close friends with our forest chief, and we can talk about things, and even if we don't agree or don't, or in some cases maybe one of us doesn't have as much information or experience as the other, because we live in a small community and our kids play together, and we see each other and run into each other all the time, and it's multiple people, multiple members of the U.S. Forest Service here in our community. We come as like people first and not the hats that we wear, and I really appreciate that a lot. And so in conversations over fire pits, and campfires, and beers at bars, we can like learn more about the other person's experiences and understandings, and keep asking questions and then supporting each other when it comes down to how we need that support to look. And I'm really grateful for that. And I do think it's important to have those types of local conversations as well, but not limit it to the Forest Service. It should include our tribal leaders, and it should also include our business owners and owners of the recreation community and the hospitality industries that really rely on these lands to be protected and intact.
This is not the first time that a We All California call has kind of landed on we need to connect with our communities and really be in conversation with our neighbors. And I think that is for a reason. One more comment. I have found the upper management highly educated and are highly educated and understand the science that led to the need for protecting our environment and public lands. Upper management in NFS often is very sensible.
Same.
Yeah,
Totally.
agreed.
God.
We are coming up against time here. We've got a couple people who haven't asked any questions or contributed, and I just want to make sure we give them the space to do that if they would like to, no pressure. Otherwise, if anyone has any final comments or questions they'd like to add, now is the time.
I have a question. Will you be leading any other sessions in the near future, and what are they about?
Yeah.
Jesse. Yeah, that was
Oh,
to
oh, I'm
Jesse.
sorry. I was like, okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
I didn't know that was from me either. We can discuss that, David. Nothing currently planned, I don't think.
That's not true. In two
Me
weeks.
personally leading, you're leading.
No, you
What am
and
I?
Stacy.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh my gosh, I feel bad now. I forgot about Stacy. My mind is like day to day right now. Sorry. Yeah, in a few weeks, a friend of We All California, Stacy, is going to be joining us for a discussion kind of about similar levels of local engagement with policy. She's been doing some work specifically in her area around kind of development and how it's affected her community, and she's got a lot to share about kind of that specific process of identifying who the kind of important people are and accessing them and spreading correct information. So I think it'll pair nicely with this discussion if anyone here is interested in joining us for that. The information is on our website. Um, yeah, David, I'm hoping that was what you wanted me to share. Okay,
I have a question
please.
about engagement. I find that one of the hardest things about this time in our history is getting people to pay attention, to get engaged, and that we need um, more people to be involved to really have a sense of empowerment as people. And I just wonder how you handle that.
Is that a question for me?
Anybody that has anything that's trying to reach out to anybody who's trying to build a consensus of the people to move us towards a time where we're making the decisions and not the politicians.
Right, right. Or just ensuring that those electeds are working in our favor and accurately representing us, because there's a huge gap with that. I could go on and on about that actually. But what I'm thinking the most important way to kind of crack through to what prevents people from taking action, whether it's apathy or ignorance or overwhelm or whatever it is that keeps people from taking action on this issue on any issue, but public lands in particular, I really think is getting people together in person. Coming out of the COVID era where we weren't engaging in person for very long, I'm finding that in-person events and opportunities for gatherings feels really good to people, and it gives folks a chance to ask questions and meet new people and see eye contact and hear voices and see visuals and maps and whatever the issue, whatever the information is that can be shared, and then learn how whatever the issue is affects them personally and their loved ones and their community. And that's going to motivate people initially to take action as personal interests, but also community interests.
It's a tough nut to crack, I'll tell you that.
No kidding.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of done it. Good suggestion in the chat there. Can we receive a follow-up email with suggestions for actions? I'm thinking, Mary, it would be wonderful. You could send me those slides and I'll circulate them so people have the information from those slides. We do also post the recordings of these events to our YouTube channel. If there's anything anyone wants to revisit from today's presentation or discussion, it will be on YouTube. And yeah, I'm gonna take some of the links and stuff from the chat as well and include them in that email that goes out with the slides so that everyone has access to all the resources that we've discussed today. So yeah, thanks everybody so much. We had a couple people had to hop off. But yeah, thanks everyone so much, especially Mary for being here today.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. It was great to be here.